So welcome, everybody, and thank you to the Battle of Ideas. I'm Alkasegi Kuprit. I am Chair or Director at Don't Divide Us. This session is really about what it says on the tin. Race Equality Act. Will it include race relations or will it not? Labour had been relatively quiet about it, but it's kind of there, lurking in the background, and I'm hoping at least one of our speakers will give us elucidate a few more details. So now, to help us in our conversation with this session in hand, we have four excellent speakers who I'll introduce briefly. Their longer biographies are on the website, and do check now. I'll introduce them in the order in which they're going to speak, and then I'm going to come straight out to the audience. So first up on my violet is Albie Amankona, who is a broadcaster, financial analyst, vice chair of outreach, LGBT and conservatives. Is that right? Is that the
LGBT plus conservatives?
okay.
Call this.
A bit rough. And co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism. Then second, after Albie, will be Colin Wynter, who is a multi-award-winning barrister at Marion Wynter Chambers. I've got images of Oscars here for barristers. And a keen observer of how language is manipulated in public debates over controversial issues. Then further, we will have, on my immediate right, is Hardeep Singh, who is journalist, author of the recent Civitas report, Islamophobia, and the original one, this is the Islamophobia bash, and deputy director of the network of Sikh organisations. And then last but not least is Anna Loutfi, also a barrister at the Barrister Group and managing partner of DL Law, and a member of Don't Divide Us Advisory Board. So let's just get stuck in, and Albie, you've got each one will have 5 to 6 minutes to speak. Go.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all so much for coming. So Labour's landmark race equality act, what they propose, is aiming to enshrine equal pay for Black, Asian and other ethnic minorities and strengthen protections against Jew discrimination and other racial equalities. Sounds like a noble goal, because after all, who isn't Labour but equality under law and equality of opportunity? But this proposal might lead somebody to think that employers are currently free to pay people differently based on their ethnicity, or that there's a significant legislative gap in UK anti-discrimination laws. And the simple fact of the matter is, no such gaps exist. And this is something which most would agree on. I spoke to experts on both the left and the right. But today some people will disagree with me, but a lot of them that I speak to say that no such legislative gap exists. And whilst race might be a key factor in some disparities, let's take health outcomes, quite a well-cited example is the disparity that we see in maternal mortality rates between white mothers and non-white mothers, or the very well-documented disparity in the criminal justice system. It does explain disparities in all areas. If we look at education outcomes, some ethnic minority groups, like the British Indian cohort or the British Chinese cohort, actually outperform the white British cohort, which is of course the white majority cohort. And that actually, within racial groups, we can see very big disparities in outcomes. If we take the Black African community, they tend to have a lot better outcomes than the Black Caribbean community, which would suggest that perhaps race alone isn't always the key factor when it comes to life outcomes. But all of that being said, a lot of conservatives can make unhelpful statements like, Britain is the best place in the world to be an ethnic minority, without actually accepting that things could and should be better. And so that underpinned, I suppose, the government's response to the BLM protest back in 2020. There was the inclusive strategy laws launched by Laura Shropshire, taken up by then Equalities Minister, hopefully the next door leader, Kemi Badenoch. And then in response to that, Labour come up with their Race Equality Act. I think it is notable that George Floyd's murder thousands of miles away created a bigger conversation about race relations in the UK than the recent violence did. And I think we need to take calls to think about why that happened. Personally, I think we need to be more proactive when it comes to the conversation about race relations here. And so I suppose you'd argue this is some proactivity, but I personally think it's wrong. I think probably the best example of proactivity in the race relations discussion in the UK recently was Theresa May's race disparity audit, which was, I think it's back in 2018. But it wasn't fully built upon the political turbulence that happened after Theresa May. I think all of that probably better off forgotten. So we have all of this data on race relations, but what are we doing with it? Too often, it's just left geeky people on panels like me to discuss it with audiences who are interested, like yourselves. So I think we need to take the conversation out of Westminster, and we need to broaden the conversation to all four corners of the United Kingdom. I don't claim to have all the answers on improving race relations, but I do know that we're not making the most of forums that bring together policymakers, experts, community leaders, and the general public. And I think forums like this are really powerful opportunities for progress. So instead of a sweeping Race Equality Act to solve race relations in the UK once and for all, I would propose a simpler, non-legislative solution. And a solution that I think would actually be more effective. An annual national forum on race relations, a similar concept to the ill-fated LGBT conference, a Say to Be Me conference that the Boris Johnson Tory government proposed. I think it was meant to take place in 2022, but that didn't happen for reasons that I'm not necessarily unhappy about. But I would propose that this conference on race relations could take place around the time of the anniversary of the landing of the Empire Windrush. It could bring together government organisations, non-government organisations, policymakers, expert and community leaders that could participate in open discussions with Q&A sessions that could help the audience and the public participate in these important conversations. Crucially, I think this forum would need to be inclusive of the struggles of white working class people as much as ethnic minorities, because we know that disparities aren't necessarily limited to race. It's an evidence-based, inclusive approach to race relations that focuses on the most important part of diversity, which in my opinion is diversity of opinion. And I think this is how we can make real progress on race relations in Britain. An annual forum, having conversations involving the general public, involving experts, coming up with ways to improve race relations and community cohesion in Britain without the need for more legislation on top of legislation that actually sorts out a lot of the problems that this Race Equality Act claims that it wants to solve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and well within time. Excellent. So we'll give everyone a huge round at the end. Let's push on with next up, Colin.
Well, let's start by saying I started my career at the bar before there was a thing called diversity. There was nothing. We barely had, I think, 6 or 7 years at the Race Relations Act, which had no discrimination. So those were times when you had to rely upon ability, merit, and the goodwill of those people who might give them a chance. So I call it the Wild West days. And I've watched over the past 40 years, there's this move, a position where my race was an impediment, to position now, too late for me, where I could use my race as an advantage. And both to me are equally wrong. Now, you probably were wondering, as I did, and I did until last night, what is this Race Equality Act all about? Where is it? Where's the draft legislation? What does it look like? What are you trying to do with it? So next, I decided to have a look, and what I found was very interesting. There's not much in the Lake Party. There's the manifesto, and I never looked at it before last night, and it went plowing through page after page after page, so I got to the end of this, and it says, not a loss, but it's tell us this. Sorry, to the very end. It says, Labour will introduce a landmark Race Equality Act to enshrine law full rights, equal pay for Black, Asian and other ethnic peoples. One small mercy there, at least we're not called beige. Whiskey of Black and minority ethnic. Now, I don't know about it, but to me, the most offensive part of that is the turning of an adjective to now an adjective, only on it oaks. That beige, let's say, unaffected people, strengthen section against dual discrimination and root out other racial inequalities. And said a bit more about we will introduce the full right to equal pay. For the sake of the we all could float that. That's a easily defined route that deserves equal treatment. Building on gender pay gap, of course, you do issue disability and ethnicity pay gap for the large employers. There's large employers, not small ones. Now, large employers that we all know operate pay grades, pay scales. So you're going to take a say within some small crowd, but it is the same work for somebody else. This is aimed at something entirely different. And we know that from documents, the TUC documents, and it may be going to what follows that this, but says this: an ethnicity pay gap is a measure of the difference between ethnic groups, Aboriginals, regardless of role or seniority. So you have built in there this disparity will automatically have a gap at the pay gap that must be filled. How do you fill it? How do you fill it? You appoint somebody, you recruit people on high salary who are black or Asian or as a minority in order to fill that gap and narrow that ethnic pay gap. And what you do is you can go to the Davos, or you go to all the world level forum places and say, look what we've done, we have no ethnic pay gap. Meanwhile, you install somebody who may be embarrassed to have the job, maybe they're happy, and you build resentment in the workplace for those who think, why is that chap or that woman a job? Why is Colin Wynter being made £250,000 a year head of diversity? I think I know why that happened. They wanted to narrow that ethnic pay gap. I've been shown the yellow card, which means I have 2 minutes. It's like within 2 minutes. But that's the TUC guide. And I don't know whether going to say that this. But the real problem I see is one I just put out a landscape. It's you start out with gaps, and people, by the time these are being discussed, can be asking, what's it mean the ethnic pay gap? It should mean for people who are same job but pay different money, alike variables of seniority and thicker scales. But that's not necessarily. I very much doubt that what they're doing. They're looking at using equity. We all know where that comes from. Equity, easy eye, equity part. To narrow gaps of outcome rather than ability or achievements.
Thank you so much. Again, very, very disciplined speakers. Thank you for getting some very interesting things about it there. Next up, Harvey.
Thank you. This is all very well-meaning by Labour. You like to see themselves as chapter in diversity. However, I've been asked to the question, I think this is necessarily a support community petition, allowed anybody beyond the existing legal framework. So I'm agreeing with the previous speakers. However, I think it might exacerbate identity politics, and that can lead to more division, sadly. So improving race relations, I believe, quite more of a holistic approach. You can look at education disparities, social segregation, integration, and look at the role of the family. And etymology, also differences between cultures. And we get from the Kemi Banor got herself in a bit of hot water about basically when she said modern culture are equal. I've been the victim of this. I mean, I know what it's like, as many of you probably do. I remember getting on a bus in London many years ago and ordering my fare, and a charming gentleman standing behind me said, Raghead's got more of a Cockney accent than I have. And around the same kind of time, when I was at university, I was assaulted by extremists and now prescribed disparity. There's one particular zealot who used to shoulder barge every time he saw me on canvas. He only stopped when he received a splendid counter barge from Monacolia. However, I mean, I think when my father grew up at that time, that racism was like it's South riots, 1979, time of the National Front. But if we look at things now, they differ. The BNP aren't believing council or elections seats or European Parliament seats, and I've never dreamed that a fellow Punjabi would be the Prime Minister of this country. But we find ourselves in this great position now where people asking the question, milk racist, or see countryside a racist and colonialist white space. Now, the Sunday disorder has opened a lot of people's eyes in terms of the fragility of society. This new piece of legislation does not frankly deal with complex reasons that trigger views of marginalisation among some sections of society, and they feel left behind. I mean, Sama, who gave the, I'd say, miscalculated need to BLM, was very quick to dismiss all the Southport protesters as far right. Yes, there were some far right people, but not all were. And there still appears to be very little at this time of the government to look at reasons why we had that flare-up of violence across the country. And the proposed legislation on ethnicity disability payouts doesn't really kind of tell us what we need to do. I agree for disability, that's much more clear-cut and important. However, I think with ethnicity, there's variation across different ethnic groups, and that we should automatically assume it's really down to discrimination. One thing's almost said, and I say this to two lawyers on the panel, that the e-legislation would like to bolster the well-upholstered trouser pockets of lawyers, given what we've really seen in the case with ASA, and as one politician puts it, the legislation will be a bonanza for dodging activist lawyers. Lord Sewell's report for the Commission on Racial and Ethnic Disparities points to a statistical challenge when it comes to looking at ethnicity pay gaps. I mean, we're all kind of aware of that. And I think one of the other speakers touched on this. The Labour Forces Survey demonstrated for Indian and Chinese men and British Black African men, as well as white men. Other groups noticeably less, so Pakistani and Bangladeshi men, particularly those born outside of the UK, earn less. But until we kind of get to the root cause of this disparity and look beyond discrimination, we're not going to move any further forwards. But for me, the starting point to all this is what qualified as an ethnicity. What is an ethnic minority? According to the census, there's 19 different ethnic groups. In London, there's over 100. I'll put a yellow card. I'll be very quick. And we've got these terms like baying that are floating around. I totally agree that, Colin, that's the catching term, which is actually quite insulting. And it never often covers white gypsies or travellers or Jews. You often don't think of them, and you think of the word babe or B&E. One of the other things I see coming on the horizon, which I'm quite simple, to be honest, is that some religions perceive themselves to be ethnicities or racial groups, and that's going to have serious consequences for this legislation. Take my community. There was a campaign by a pro-Khalistan group who suggested that Sikhs are an ethnic group. They should be recorded as such in the census. Now, unfortunately, the NS didn't do that, but still, there's people in my community who believe that Sikhs are an ethnic group and they should be recorded as such. And I've probably got 1 minute left, so I'm going to be very brief. My personal view is that we don't need a new law that perpetuates a racialised view of society. We've got the necessary protections in the existing legal framework, and to improve those relations, we need to start off with education which starts at home. We've got to look at our commonalities. We've got to look at how we're bringing up our children, because ultimately the family is the testing ground for the real world.
Like you said, Barbara.
So Lydia, some really important things coming out here. We've got the idea that Albie introduced that, that we might be against the Race Equality Act, but does that mean there's no room for improvement in our society? What might that improvement be? Where might it come from? Which are things that both Colin and Hardeep have looked at in different ways. Education, the family, apply to disability, which seems a clearer category than race. But anyway, just to keep those in your head while we come to our final speaker, last but not least, Cabot.
Thanks, Elka. And thanks for having me. A vodka and tonic to anyone in the room who can guess my ethnic minority say. I'd be very interested for thought. I'm going to respond to the topic today with some questions, reflections, really. I haven't got any answers, they're just questions. Colin has just spread out the relative passage from the Labour Party Manifesto. Labour is led by Race Equality Act, enshrining in law to full right to pay for Black, Asian, and other ethnic minority people. Blah, blah, blah. We are not told in this manifesto, if I know documents anywhere else, which might insist, I haven't seen the Cody document Colin put it, but we're not really told what is meant by equal pay. There's no reference in this manifesto to equal work, although it's inferred that equal pay for equal work is packaged within offered. But more significantly, and Hardeep just touched on this, we have provided with nothing to help us to understand what is meant by the phrase Black, Asian, and other ethnic minority people. We haven't written the expression on what legally is being proposed by the government, not benefiting IFA, and for who. We've been given no data, no research, qualitative or quantitative, with no problems that we are told that this proposal will seek to address. We're not told what ethnic pay gap reporting for large employers is, how it's carried out. We're not only told what is a large employer. Now, Annalise Dodds, in a Guardian article earlier this year, stated, "It's never been more important to deliver race equality. Inequality has soared under the Tories, and too many black racial and minority families are working harder and harder for less and less." Well, on what researchers have stated based that race inequality has soared, does she mean that all black, all Asian, and all ethnic minority families are working harder and harder for less and less? Because of race, and against which categories she's speaking, are non-black, non-Asian, ethnic majorities, whatever that means, not working harder and harder for less and less? And is that nothing to do with their ways? How are economic conditions explained by race? And it's significant, I said, that government has wholly ignored Toyi Sewell's March 2021 report with the Commission on Race and Disparities, in which she points out the really rather A-level basic difference between disparity and discrimination, and the significant statistical and data issues that arise where you clumsily and substitute the binary characteristic of male and female with the complex, multifaceted characteristic that ethnicity, lumping whole swathes of the population into minority groupings for no other reason than to virtue signal and falsely apologise for the existence of the British Empire. Now, I remember back in the day that when we were told that we were going to vote on Brexit, one of the arguments was that we needed immigrants because British people won't do certain jobs. The jobs that they were talking about were low-paid jobs, fruit pickers, auxiliaries in the NHS, cleaners, nurses. So is the Labour Party seeking to challenge the paradox that people will come to the United Kingdom to do low-paid work that the natives won't do when they propose this race equality? Yeah, I'm interested in your thoughts on that, because actually what we are dealing with in reality is a globalized labour market where low pay is an incentive to people to foreign countries. And that was acknowledged universally on the left as an argument for Remain. So I would ask, Nick, I'd invite your thoughts on whether or not actually Labour is now seeking to matebise the labour market as opposed to mobilise. And as a time already, I will just say very briefly in closing that the Equality Act as it stands does prohibit racial discrimination at law. So it is a massive question what it is that these proposals seek to ask. But I would also go back to the point again that Hardeep made about definitions. Definitions are all in law. What is black? What is Asian? What is an ethnic minority? Are Chinese, Koreans, Brazilians, Portuguese, Spanish, Welsh, Macedonians, Ukrainians, Jamaicans, Nigerians, Egyptians, Jordanians, Bangladeshis, in whatever combination you can imagine, to be plonked on the side of a binary named ethnic minority against an ill-defined category of ethnic majority, which, by the way, if we mean white British, are now a minority in this very city. There are other issues as well, which I'm having to talk about in the discussion, but the main one, as I close, is what is meant by equal work. We know at law that it no longer means identical jobs. It means similar or equal in value. So I invite you to think about this as my conclusion. Is race not here an elephant in the room? Actually, that's the wrong phrase. Is it not a massive distraction? This is not about race. This is about encouraging a view of the labour market which is completely divorced from the realities of the business and the economic world, and encouraging us to think about employment as something that is increasingly controlled and centralised by the state, where wages are increasingly uniform and competition is increasingly reduced as an option for entrepreneurial, independent economic actors in this country. It is, in other words, socialism by back door, and race is the weapon that's being mobilised to introduce it in the name of kindness and apologies for past historic wrongs. Thank you.
Thank you.